Hey, all you literary legends and luminaries. I'm Julie, and welcome to another episode of Booksmart. Today's book is a memoir that was in Oprah's book club selection. It's The Many Lives of Mama Love, a memoir of lying, stealing, writing, and healing by Lara Love Hardin. This is going to be a very mixed review. I liked it, but I didn't. So Hardin was dubbed the neighbor from hell in local headlines in California. She and her second husband, DJ, are drug addicts. They have a son together named Caden, who is close to 2 years old. They live in a nice neighborhood with yuppie moms and all that stuff. DJ and Hardin use all their income to buy drugs, so she steals other moms' credit cards to buy groceries and things for Caden. They get caught and go to jail. The book deals primarily with her jail time, its aftermath, and getting extremely lucky with jobs where she ends up a ghostwriter. That's the story in a nutshell. Just to get my biases out there right away, because such biases do impact my opinion of a book, and I feel it's important to admit that up front so you can take some of my criticism with a grain of salt. I don't like addiction books. I rarely read them. I have been at the receiving end of someone's addiction, and it's not fun at all. And at times I was treated worse than the addict and even blamed, although all forms of recovery and treatment like to say it's no one's fault. It is a disease after all, comparing it to cancer, which my mother died from, and addiction and cancer are nothing alike, like ever in any universe. When I read an addict's memoir, I'm on edge, looking for the first sign of lack of accountability or minimizing their own actions, ready to pounce on them and call them out for it. Just take that into consideration as I review Hardin's book. The book was a page-turner, at least for the first two-thirds of it or so. I was interested to see what would happen and equally disgusted by both Hardin and DJ's choices. Hardin focuses so much on the moment that she even writes in the present tense, which is a unique narrative choice, one I'm not sure I agree with, though. It's difficult to write scenes from your life from the present when they happened long ago, and it also doesn't allow the narrator to reflect on such experiences without breaking that present moment. And that's one of the things I didn't like about the book. Hardin doesn't develop or reflect much upon her actions. If she does, it's a flippant remark that lessens her epiphany, or she ends up contradicting herself later on. Here's an example when she stays in the reflection longer, but doesn't stay there long enough, in my opinion, because it's like she's just scratching the surface. So she's standing in court, and the judge and the prosecutor are hearing what they're saying. A lot of the details she gives are false. Our house was not full of trash. He was not left alone. But it doesn't matter at this point. I am not a good mother simply because I'm wearing shackles in the uniform of the county jail. The attorney goes on and on about my failures as a mother. There's not a mother I know who hasn't been mom-shamed in one way or another. It goes with the territory. This is the Olympics of mom-shaming, though, and I look down at my lap, my cheeks burning. I know I would throw myself in front of a bus to save each one of my boys. I would sacrifice my life for theirs, but I couldn't stop using drugs for them. I don't know how to reconcile those two truths. The simpler answer is most likely, I am not a good mother. I am a horrible mother. I must love drugs more than I love my children. There's no other reason for why I'm here, for why I didn't spend the morning making lunches and driving carpool. I deserve to be mom-shamed. But then later in the book, she kind of pulls the poor me. I don't know. I know I'm being too hard on Hardin. In regards to her accountability, well, this angered me. She minimizes her stealing, brags about being smart enough to create her own credit card numbers, and even suggests that she shouldn't have to pay restitution because the credit card companies probably already reversed the fraudulent charges. And other than the Kindle she purchased using stolen credit cards, everything else she charged went to Caden. Yeah, I've got some problems with that. It's rather off-putting, especially without any follow-up reflection. That may have been her thinking at the time, but the way she wrote about it sounds like that is what she thought as she was writing this book years after it happened. On the one hand, such flippant remarks meld well with her voice, which is strong throughout the book, and remember the scenes are written in present tense. But when the voice is strong, sometimes it's easier for readers to pass judgment on the mindset of the narrator. Self-centered, shallow, and ignorant come to mind, but that may be just a result of my sensitivity toward anything involving addiction. Where I can be totally objective is in regards to her development, or lack thereof. Even though the book was a page-turner in the beginning, I had zero sympathy for Hardin, and that was not because of my bias with addiction. It was a result of her lack of development. She writes that she met DJ in recovery. This was after her divorce to Brian, her first husband. Yet the timeline is vague because she was an addict a long time before that. She doesn't end up in jail until she's like 40 or 41, yet she doesn't develop those triggering moments that led to her addiction years ago. The first part of the book moved way too fast and was disjointed because I had no anchoring moments of what led to the complete destruction of her life. Later, she writes how she started taking painkillers after her first pregnancy. But at the time, I didn't have a good grasp on the progression of her addiction at the beginning of the book. And when she starts revealing her past to people around her, she writes about how some say, cool. And Hardin seems pleased with such a reaction. I just cringe. There is nothing about addiction or jail that is cool, but maybe I'm just being a Debbie Downer with the whole addiction and jail thing. And a side note, if you read The Many Lives of Mama Love for its addiction and recovery aspect, well, don't. Hardin doesn't focus much on her sobriety, only that she just stops and then never relapses, and that's about it. Many readers and reviewers compare The Many Lives of Mama Love to Orange is the New Black. I read that book years ago, and all I remember of it was how the author told us again and again how pretty and petite and how blonde she was, and everyone said, from guards to court people to prisoners' visitors, that she was so pretty and small and that she didn't belong in jail. Because of that, I never watched the show. Hardin's book is not that different. Prettiness isn't mentioned, but Hardin refers to her MFA about 50 times in the book. Yes, we know you're not the common criminal, but part of this is Hardin's own fault. Without developing enough of her life prior to her jail time, I have little context with which to connect the dots. Yet Hardin spends plenty of time in the book complaining that everyone is out to get her, and even goes so far as to share an affair she had with the district attorney years ago, and that his wife is also an attorney, and it's probably his wife who is behind some of her charges. When she graduates from a jail program, she makes sure to tell us that that DA shows up and that DAs never show up to such ceremonies. What she decides to develop in the book or not is highly suspect. I'm not even sure I understand her financial situation at the time of her arrest. In a magazine article I found online, it mentioned her $1 million home, yet in the book she said that the home was never hers, but her mother-in-law's. When she gets out of jail, a distant uncle pays for her hotel until she gets on her feet, and then when DJ gets out of jail, his mom gets them an apartment. When DJ keeps using drugs and she kicks him out, she doesn't appear the least bit grateful for the apartment she must get to keep, although she mentions how her mother-in-law might kick her out. While she does throw in a comment here and there about how women without any familial support cannot follow the guidelines of parole, she doesn't really reflect on how lucky she was that she wasn't homeless. Instead, she gripes about her ex-husband's wife, who has graciously taken in Caden so he doesn't end up in foster care. It's all a bit too much for me at times, just a bit too much, way too much. However, Hardin does do an excellent job of depicting the psychotic bureaucracy of our legal system. How she has to take so many urine tests, how she has to report there or here or wherever while trying to have a full-time job, which is difficult since no one wants to hire a felon, and how is she supposed to get around without transportation, although once again, family give her a beat-up car. Then she's moved to family court instead of drug court to get Caden back, but by doing so, her record isn't expunged and DJ completes the rules of drug court and then no longer has to pay restitution. I wish Hardin would have spent much more time developing the sociopathic nature of parole. I teach at a juvenile detention center, so I see a lot of the inconsistent ways the courts deal with children charged with crimes. For instance, a student can run from placement, get rearrested, and come back to JDC, and then the judge releases them. Huh? Then we'll have a student get more or less stuck at JDC for months, not because of criminal reasons, but there's nowhere else for them to go. How can they not have anywhere else to go? Then when students do get released, we send them right back home to the environment in which they can't possibly succeed, whether it's families or friends or even the schools that just don't have the supports in place to deal with such students. I don't think the run-of-the-mill person understands any of this. And since The Many Lives of Mama Love is an Oprah Book Club book, I'm guessing there's a lot of readers that have no idea the paradoxes of our legal system. Hardin even writes, albeit briefly, about some of the women she met in jail, and we learn a few of her closer bedmates and those she bumped around. But here is a paragraph that kind of summarizes these women in general. I met extremely smart women in jail, CEO level smart, former drug dealers who were sales and marketing geniuses, others who were hustlers and designers and innovators. I'd like to see Elon Musk design IKEA level modular furniture out of Tampax boxes and toothpaste. I challenge any beauty influencer to create a full glam makeover out of hot water and a box of colored pencils. Or any Michelin-starred chef to make a delicious meal out of Cheetos, ramen, leftover hard-boiled eggs, hot water, and mystery meat. I see the same qualities in my students. There is so much potential and possibilities if even given a chance to rehabilitate. But our system is just not built to give ex-cons a fighting chance. It's really, really too bad. The last third of The Many Lives of Mama Love is not as exciting, especially when Hardin doesn't always appear to realize how lucky she is. But let me read you a part that deals with her writing and what that does for her. And she says, from the time I first escaped into books, all I wanted was to be a writer. I was going to write novels that moved people, that helped them understand the world and themselves better. I wanted to make people feel, whether it was laughing or crying. And if the vision also had me rich and famous and fabulous, I was okay with that. Writing was always the only way for me to make sense of my childhood, my family, my fears, my emotions, my vast and confusing interior world. I was always a better version of me on the page. I was always at my most honest on the page. I could transcend every limitation I believed I had when I wrote. In high school, I may have lived in a small apartment while my friends had big lawns, but writing transcended class. Writing transcended loneliness. Writing transcended self-doubt and fear and heartbreak. I never needed a drink or a drug to write. I love reading about others' writing processes and such, so I am particularly interested in that, yet it gets to be a bit much as she writes all the praise she received for each little thing she wrote in whatever program she was in. While her memoir is a good read, it doesn't possess the beauty of language or even a ton of wow moments. It's good, but it's nothing out of this world. I've read more poetic books by writers who will never be an Oprah Book Club pick. Which leads me to my last disappointment, which is not Hardin's fault. I had this vision of Oprah perusing bookstores on her own, picking up books that spoke to her, reading those books, and then choosing the one that blew her away for her book club selection. Let's face it, if Oprah selects your book, you will be a New York Times bestselling author and will even survive the disgrace of lying about said book like James Fry did. I imagined Oprah finding these rare gems of books on her own without solicitation, without nepotism. Sure, Oprah probably knows many of the authors whose names appear on those books, but let's be real. There are a ton of books out there. Remember, a publisher only expects to sell about 5,000 copies of any book they choose to publish. In our world full of billions, 5,000 is nothing. So I thought Oprah would find these little known authors, authors who don't have connections or MFAs or enviable luck. Well, Hardin's book burst that bubble. Hardin co-writes The Sun Does Shine with Anthony Ray Hinton, whose story had connections to Bryan Stevenson, the guy who wrote Just Mercy, which I did read, but I haven't read The Sun Does Shine. Oprah selects The Sun Does Shine for her book club and meets with Anthony Ray Hinton and Hardin. So even Oprah's book club is bound with nepotism, and not like a fun 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon way, but more of a, I know this person and this book was fine, so it's the next Oprah book club selection. Well, blah. Why I thought Oprah's book club was free of nepotism is ignorantly naive on my part, but can't one thing in this world not have nepotistic connections? And it's interesting because there isn't one quote on the back of the book or anywhere on her cover or her book jacket, which I found odd. Hardin didn't solicit the book to fellow writers and pay them for such quotes, probably because she didn't need to because she knew Oprah already. And a side note, Hardin runs her own literary company but didn't publish her own book. In fact, her literary company doesn't even appear to publish books, kind of. I don't know. I'm confused, but that's neither here nor there. My sensitivity aside, yes, you should read The Many Lives of Mama Love, if just to learn about how our parole system is not designed for success or even to make productive members of society. If a newly released prisoner does not have family support or a safe place to return to, it's almost impossible to become a productive member of society. We complain about high recidivism rates, but part of that is due to the sociopathic nature of parole guidelines. The Many Lives of Mama Love will also hint at the power of reading and writing, which are things very dear to my heart. Yes, you might roll your eyes at times and scoff like I did while you're reading the book, but it's a relatively quick read where you just might learn something you didn't already know. And that, to me, always makes a book worthy of a read. Thanks for watching. As always, my goal at Booksmart is to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.